Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because when we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you. The dim lighting of the Crimson Nebula Lounge flickered as Jorik slid into the shadowed booth, his silhouette merging with the darkness. Across from him sat a hulking figure, Varn, whose reputation for orchestrating the galaxy's most discreet operations was unrivaled. "Jorik, your reputation precedes you," Varn's voice rumbled, a low vibration that seemed to blend with the ambient hum of the bar. "I trust you're interested in a job that requires your particular set of skills." Jorik nodded, his eyes scanning the digital file that Varn slid across the table. The screen lit up with the image of a human, a rarity in his usual line of work. "Tomas? Huh? What makes this human worth the attention of someone like me?" Varn chuckled, a sound like grinding rocks. "He's been poking around in matters that don't concern his kind. Our clients believe he's obtained information that could destabilize the current power alignments. And you believe a human is capable of such a feat?" Jorik asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "It's not about what I believe," Varn replied, leaning back. "It's about what our clients are willing to pay to ensure there's no risk. They want Tomas eliminated quietly and efficiently." Jorik studied the human's image, noting the average build, the unassuming eyes. Nothing about Tomas screamed danger, yet the price on his head told a different story. "Where do I find him?" Last seen on HFY, at the edge of Harmony. It's a bustling trade planet, neutral territory, lots of places to hide. Varn pushed a data chip across the table. "Everything you need is on there. And Jorik, this needs to be clean. No traces, no witnesses." Accepting the chip, Jorik stood, his frame nearly matching Varn's in size. "You'll have your clean job, Varn. When have I ever disappointed?" "Never. Which is why you're still alive in this business," Varn grunted as Jorik turned to leave. Exiting the lounge, Jorik tapped the data chip against his wrist device, downloading Tomas's last known locations and known associates. If he was going to understand his target, he needed to immerse himself in Tomas's world. Stepping into the bustling streets of the galactic hub, Jorik couldn't help but feel the thrill of a new hunt. This job, however, had layers he hadn't anticipated. A human stirring up enough trouble to warrant an interstellar hit? Curious. He decided his first step was to track down one of Tomas's associates mentioned in the data, Mikkel, a fellow human known to frequent the markets of Tertia 5. As Jorik made his way to his ship, his thoughts lingered on the task ahead. Tomas, an unremarkable human on the surface, had somehow managed to terrify the galaxy's elite. Jorik was intrigued, if not yet convinced, of the threat Tomas posed. But if there was one thing Jorik knew, it was that appearances in his line of work were often deceiving. The real game was about to begin. Jorik's ship landed discreetly on the outskirts of Vigo City, Tertia 5. The planet thrummed with diverse life forms, bustling markets, and vibrant energy, a perfect cover for anyone seeking anonymity. Jorik cloaked his true identity with a holographic disguise, transforming his features to blend in as just another trader among the crowd. As he navigated through the crowded streets, Jorik activated his wrist device to scan the area for his contact, Mikkel. The device beeped softly, directing him towards the central marketplace where Mikkel was last spotted. The market was a riot of colors and noises. Stalls displayed exotic goods from across the galaxy, spices that shimmered with hidden colors, fabrics that changed texture with the weather, and creatures whose forms seemed impossible by natural laws. Amidst this chaos, Jorik found Mikkel bartering over a set of rare minerals. Approaching cautiously, Jorik feigned interest in a nearby stall while listening in on Mikkel's haggling. "Come on, Krell. You know these are worth twice what you're offering," Mikkel argued, his voice firm yet friendly. The vendor, a burly creature with tentacles for arms, gurgled something in return, waving an appendage dismissively. Jorik seized his moment, stepping forward with a friendly smile. "Friend, you might want to try the Pyrrhic crystals from the southern quadrant. Much higher quality for your needs." Mikkel turned, eyeing Jorik with a hint of suspicion before his expression softened. "Thanks for the tip," he replied, extending his hand. "Name's Mikkel. Call me Ronan," Jorik said, using his alias. "New here, just trying to find good deals. The two struck up a conversation, with Jorik weaving a believable backstory for his alias. As they talked, Jorik steered the conversation towards less innocuous topics. So, Mikkel, I hear from the chatter that this place can be a goldmine for information. You seem like a man who knows his way around. Mikkel laughed, nodding in agreement. Yeah, you could say that. I've had my ear to the ground for years. You looking for anything specific? Possibly, Jorik said, keeping his tone nonchalant. Heard rumors about a human causing some waves. Name's Tomas. Know him? Mikkel's eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of recognition passing through. Tomas? Yeah, I know him. But he's not the kind of trouble you're implying. More like a guy who's in over his head, if anything. Intriguing, Jorik mused. I'm interested in meeting him. Got any idea where I might find him? Mikkel hesitated, then sighed. Look, Tomas is a friend. He's not into anything dangerous, just has a knack for digging up things people want buried. If you're not looking to cause him harm, I might help you out. Jorik nodded, giving his best reassuring smile. Just a meeting. Nothing more. All right, he frequents a cafe near the East Docks. The Lowry's Nest. You'll likely find him there in the evenings, Mikkel divulged, still somewhat reluctant. Thanks, Mikkel. I appreciate it, Jorik said, clapping him on the shoulder before making his departure. As Jorik walked away, his mind raced with possibilities. Mikkel's protective stance suggested Tomas was more than just a simple information broker. He decided his next move would be to observe Tomas at the cafe, gauge the man himself before deciding how to proceed. Tonight's meeting at the Lowry's Nest would be critical. The evening haze settled over Vigo City as Jorik, still under the guise of Ronin, made his way to the Lowry's Nest. The cafe was tucked away in a less frequented part of the East Docks, its dimly lit sign flickering in the twilight. Inside, the atmosphere was subdued, with patrons engaged in hushed conversations over steaming cups of exotic brews. Jorik spotted Tomas immediately, sitting alone at a corner table, his eyes focused on a data pad. He approached casually, ordered a drink, and took the seat next to Tomas. Mind if I join you? Jorik asked, his tone friendly. Tomas looked up, a hint of wariness in his gaze. Not at all, but I'm not much for company tonight, he replied, though he made no move to close his data pad or leave. I understand. Sometimes the crowd can be too much. I'm Ronin, by the way. Jorik extended his hand. Tomas, he responded, shaking Jorik's hand briefly. What brings you to the Lowry's Nest? Not exactly a hot spot. Just looking for a quiet place to think, Jorik said, settling into his chair. You seem buried in your work. Hope I'm not interrupting anything crucial. Just some research. I'm a historian of sorts, Tomas explained, his eyes lighting up a bit. I specialize in the socio-political dynamics of alien civilizations. Fascinating how much you can learn about the present by looking at the past. That sounds incredibly interesting, Jorik said, genuinely intrigued despite himself. Any particular era or species that you focus on? I'm currently studying the trade routes established by the Zeltrans and how they influence the cultural exchanges between the human and ulnar sectors. Tomas's guarded demeanor began to thaw as he delved into details of his research. As they spoke, Jorik found himself drawn into the conversation, impressed by Tomas's depth of knowledge and the passion with which he spoke. It was a contrast to the image he had formed of Tomas as just a target. He noticed how Tomas's eyes sparkled when discussing unifying theories or the impact of certain events on broader galactic peace. Do you believe that these interactions could lead to better relations between species today? Jorik asked, steering the topic towards something that might reveal why Tomas was considered dangerous. Possibly, Tomas mused, but it's not just about trade or diplomacy. It's about understanding and respecting each other's histories and cultures. We're more interconnected than most realize, and sometimes that scares people. Knowledge can be as threatening as a weapon. Jorik paused, considering these words. It sounds like you might have stumbled onto something sensitive in your studies. Tomas smiled wryly. Maybe. Let's just say I've learned things that certain parties would prefer remain obscure. History can be inconvenient. Jorik nodded, sensing the hidden depths in Tomas's simple statement. They continued to talk, and as the evening wore on, the initial purpose of Jorik's visit blurred into genuine fascination and respect. He was beginning to understand why someone might fear Tomas, not for violent tendencies, but for the potential of his insights to provoke change. As they parted ways later that evening, Jorik felt a pang of conflict. Completing his mission had never before felt so complicated. Tomas was not just a repository of dangerous information. He was a thinker, a connector of dots in a galaxy that often preferred to keep them separate. Jorik knew then that his next steps would require careful consideration. The following day, Jorik returned to the Lowry's nest, once again as Ronan. His encounter with Tomas had left him intrigued and somewhat unsettled. As he entered, he spotted Tomas already seated at the same corner table, absorbed in his data pad. "Mind if I join you again?" Jorik asked, approaching the table with a tentative smile. Tomas looked up, a flash of surprise in his eyes that quickly turned into a welcoming grin. "Ronan, right? Sure. Have a seat. I didn't expect to see you back here. I found our conversation last night quite enlightening," Jorik confessed as he sat down. "You made me think about things differently. I hope I'm not imposing." "Not at all," Tomas replied, setting his data pad aside. "I enjoy the company, especially when it's someone who actually listens. What brings you back?" "I've been pondering what you said about historical impacts on current events. It's fascinating how interconnected things are," Jorik said, easing into the conversation. "That's just the tip of the iceberg," Tomas said with a chuckle. "Every once in a while, you find patterns that seem to recur. It's like the galaxy is on a loop, repeating the same mistakes. Do you ever share your findings?" Jorik inquired, gauging Tomas's influence. "I try to," Tomas admitted. "I've published a few articles, given some talks. Nothing too mainstream, but it reaches those who are interested. You'd be surprised how many are hungry for a new perspective." The conversation drifted to specific historical events, with Tomas elaborating on instances where lesser-known facts had surfaced, altering the public's understanding of past conflicts. Jorik listened intently, his initial mission fading into the background as his respect for Tomas grew. "Have you ever faced opposition because of your work?" Jorik asked, subtly probing for the reasons behind the contract on Tomas's life. "Sometimes," Tomas said with a sigh. "Not everyone is thrilled when you dig up skeletons they thought were well buried. I've received a few threats, been warned to stop poking around. Doesn't that scare you?" Jorik's tone was a mix of concern and admiration. "It does, but it also tells me I'm onto something important," Tomas replied, his expression firm. "If my research wasn't significant, no one would bother to intimidate me." As they continued to talk, the cafe began to fill with the evening crowd, the hum of conversation growing around them. Jorik found himself more drawn to Tomas, not just as a target, but as a person. He realized that eliminating such a mind would be a loss to the galaxy, a sentiment that conflicted deeply with his professional instincts. "Ronan, I'm glad I met you," Tomas said, breaking Jorik out of his reverie. "It's rare to find someone who doesn't immediately dismiss my theories as conspiracies." "Tomas, meeting you has given me a lot to think about," Jorik replied honestly. "The galaxy needs more thinkers like you, not fewer." As the night drew on, the two parted ways once more, but not before Jorik had decided to meet Tomas again. Each conversation made it harder for him to see his mission through. The bond forming between them was unexpected but undeniable. Jorik knew that whatever decision he made next would change both their lives forever. The following evening, Jorik found himself walking back to the Lowry's nest with a sense of anticipation. The weight of his mission was ever present, but now it was tangled with a genuine fondness for Tomas and his insights. He arrived earlier, securing their usual corner before Tomas walked in, looking slightly harried but smiling upon seeing Jorik. "Ronan, you're becoming a regular," Tomas joked as he sat down, easing into the chair with a relaxed sigh. "I guess I am," Jorik replied, offering a warm smile. "Your conversations are too compelling to miss." Tomas chuckled, then his expression turned more serious. "I've been thinking a lot about our talks. I find it refreshing to speak freely without worrying about the repercussions. It's a rare luxury for me." Jorik nodded, feeling the gravity of Tomas's situation. Speaking of which, have you ever thought about the danger you might be in because of your work? You mentioned threats before. Yes, it crosses my mind, Tomas admitted, looking down at his hands folded on the table. But I can't let fear dictate what I do. If I stop, it means they've won. The conversation drifted to safer topics, discussing various cultural peculiarities of alien species they both had encountered. As the evening grew late, the cafe began to empty, leaving them in a quiet bubble of privacy. Ronan, there's something I'd like to ask you, Tomas said suddenly, his tone hesitant. It's a bit personal, so feel free to decline. Go ahead, Jorik encouraged, intrigued. It's about relationships, specifically, how they're managed in your line of work. How do you balance personal connections with your professional duties? Tomas asked, his eyes searching Jorik's for understanding. Jorik paused, considering how much to reveal. It's complicated. Often, we have to put aside personal desires for the greater good. Or so we tell ourselves. Why do you ask? I'm curious because lately, I find myself appreciating our newfound friendship more than I expected. And I wonder about its place in my life. Given the uncertainties I face, Tomas confessed, his gaze steady and earnest. Jorik felt a surge of warmth. I value our friendship, too, Tomas. More than you might realize, he admitted, allowing his genuine feelings to show. The air between them charged with a new energy, a mix of vulnerability and mutual respect. Tomas reached out, his hand briefly touching Jorik's. Thank you for being honest with me, Ronan. It means more than you know. The touch, though brief, sparked something deeper between them, a connection that went beyond their initial purpose. They continued talking, the conversation flowing more freely than before, touching on hopes, fears, and dreams. As the night wore on, the moment felt right, and Jorik leaned in, his actions driven more by emotion than reason. Tomas reciprocated, meeting him halfway. The kiss was gentle, a question asked and answered with equal tenderness. What followed was a night of shared warmth and whispered confidences, a physical connection that mirrored the emotional one. The next morning, Jorik woke up with mixed emotions. Lying next to Tomas, he felt a peace he hadn't known in a long time. Yet, the reality of his mission lingered at the back of his mind, a shadow over the dawn's light. As Tomas stirred, smiling sleepily at Jorik, the assassin knew his next decisions would be the most crucial of his life. The man lying next to him had not only shared his bed but had unwittingly shared his vulnerabilities, turning from a target into something much more significant. The complexities of their relationship had deepened overnight, and with it, the stakes of his assignment. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Tomas's small living quarters, casting a warm glow over the room. Jorik lay awake, watching Tomas sleep, his mind racing with the implications of their newfound intimacy. The lines between his duty and his desires were blurring, and he found himself caught in a turmoil he had not anticipated. As Tomas stirred awake, he smiled softly at Jorik. "Good morning," he murmured, the ease in his voice belying the complexity of their situation. "Morning," Jorik replied, his voice low. The previous night had shifted something fundamental between them, and he felt a sense of urgency to resolve the conflict within him. Tomas propped himself up on one elbow, looking at Jorik with a thoughtful expression. "I know this might seem sudden, but I feel like I've known you far longer than I actually have," he said, his voice tinged with a mixture of wonder and caution. Jorik nodded, sitting up against the headboard. "I feel the same, but Tomas, there's something I need to tell you. It's important, and it might change how you see me." Tomas's expression shifted to one of concern. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, Jorik began. "I'm not just here by chance, Tomas. I was sent here to find you." He paused, gauging Tomas's reaction. Tomas pulled back slightly, his brow furrowing. "Sent? Sent by whom?" Jorik continued. "I work for those who deal in keeping secrets, maintaining balances of power. I was told you were a threat, that you had information that could destabilize things. I was supposed to just observe, report back, and now?" Tomas's voice was steady, but Jorik could see the hurt beginning to form behind his eyes. "Now, I don't believe you're a threat. not in the way they claimed. But I need to know what you've discovered, what you know that could cause such fear, Jorik said earnestly. Tomas sighed, a long, heavy breath that seemed to carry the weight of his own secrets. I've uncovered evidence of corruption, collusion at the highest levels of several influential coalitions. It's not just idle conspiracy theories. It's real, documented proof that could upend the current power structures. Jorik absorbed this, his professional instincts flaring. That's why they're scared. But why not come forward? Why keep it to yourself? I needed to be sure, to gather enough evidence that it couldn't be dismissed. And frankly, I was figuring out how to do it without ending up dead, Tomas explained, his voice laced with a bitter irony. Jorik reached for Tomas's hand, an attempt to bridge the gap that had formed between them. I believe you, and I want to help you bring this to light, the right way. Tomas looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deceit. Can I trust you, Jorik? After everything? You can. I've come to care about you, more than my mission. I'm with you in this, Jorik affirmed, his decision firm. Tomas nodded slowly, the beginnings of a plan forming between them. Okay, we'll need to be careful, strategic. They won't see it coming if we play this right. Jorik smiled, a genuine expression of alliance and affection. Then let's make sure they don't. As they sat together, plotting their next moves, Jorik felt a profound shift within himself. He was no longer just an assassin sent to eliminate a target. He was a protector, a partner in a cause far greater than any he had been assigned before. The stakes were high, but for the first time, Jorik felt that the risks were truly worth it. The tension in the air was palpable as Jorik and Tomas sat huddled over a cluttered table in Tomas's quarters. Maps, digital documents, and holographic projections of various communications and financial transactions filled the space between them. They were deep into planning how to expose the sprawling network of corruption Tomas had uncovered. Here, Tomas pointed at a series of encrypted files on his datapad, are the communications between two high-ranking officials. It's clear proof of bribery and manipulation of trade agreements. Jorik, who had dealt with many forms of deception and covert operations, was adept at finding patterns and weaknesses. We need to get these files into the right hands, but not just anyone's. The media is too risky. They could be silenced or worse. What about the Galactic Ethics Board? Tomas suggested, scrolling through his contacts. I know someone there, not very high up, but she's honest and could be our in. If she presents it during their session, it becomes public record automatically, making it harder to bury. Good, Jorik nodded. But we'll need a distraction, something to draw attention away from you as the source. They know I was looking into you. We can use that. How? Tomas looked puzzled, but intrigued. Jorik's lips curved into a sly smile. Let them catch me, or rather, think they've caught me. While they're busy with that, you get these files to your contact. Tomas hesitated, the risk to Jorik clear in his eyes. Isn't that dangerous? What if they decide to eliminate you as a loose end? It's a calculated risk, Jorik assured him. I've played the hunter for so long. I know how to be the prey when I need to. They spent the next few hours refining their plan, considering every possible response and contingency. They synchronized their datapads, set up secure lines of communication, and encrypted all their findings in a way only they could access. Once this is over, Jorik said, breaking a long silence, what will you do? You could be a target forever. Tomas looked up, his eyes meeting Jorik's with a determined spark. I've been a target since I started this research. Nothing new there. But maybe, just maybe, this could change things for the better. And us? Jorik asked, the personal stakes hanging between them. Tomas reached out, taking Jorik's hand firmly. We see it through, together. Whatever comes after, we'll face it the same way. The plan was set. 2 days later, Jorik allowed himself to be traced to a decoy location. As the enforcement units closed in, he sent a pre-recorded message to their headquarters, confessing to a fabricated plot against the government, ensuring that all resources would be focused on him. Meanwhile, Tomas met with his contact at the Galactic Ethics Board. He handed off the encrypted files and explained briefly how to access them. Make sure it's during the session. It has to be public, he stressed. As Jorik predicted, he was apprehended without harm. His captors, believing they had thwarted a major conspiracy, didn't notice the ripples spreading through the galactic network as Tomas's evidence was laid bare in a live-streamed session of the ethics board. The news exploded across the galaxy, dominating headlines and causing uproar in political circles. Corrupt officials were arrested, and emergency sessions were called to address the breaches of trust. Through it all, Jorik was released quietly once they realized he was just a distraction, his false confession unraveled by the bigger scandal. He returned to Tomas, who was waiting with the news of their success. "We did it," Tomas greeted him with a tired but triumphant smile. "We did," Jorik agreed, pulling Tomas into a tight embrace. Together, as the galaxy dealt with the fallout of their revelations, Jorik and Tomas planned their next moves, knowing they had irrevocably changed the course of their lives and perhaps the galaxy itself. But whatever the future held, they were ready, together. In the wake of the upheaval they had triggered across the galaxy, Jorik and Tomas found themselves sitting in a quiet cafe similar to the one where their alliance had formed. The galaxy outside was still adjusting to the new power dynamics, with daily news of reforms and trials. Jorik sipped his drink, watching Tomas as he scrolled through the latest updates on his datapad. "It's incredible, isn't it? Everything that's happening because of what we started." Tomas looked up, his eyes weary but shining with a sense of accomplishment. "It's more than I hoped for. To see actual change taking root. It's overwhelming. And to think, all this started because you dared to dig where they told you not to," Jorik mused, his tone mixed with pride and a hint of amusement. Tomas chuckled. "And because a certain someone decided to protect the historian instead of silencing him. You know, we've become quite the pair. Historian and assassin turned hero." Jorik smiled, reaching across the table to clasp Tomas's hand. More like partners in every sense of the word. Their conversation was interrupted by a message alert on Tomas's device. He checked it, a grin spreading across his face. "It's from my contact at the ethics board. She says the reforms are pushing through faster than expected. They're dismantling some of the old structures, making way for new governance." "That's good news," Jorik said. "It means your work, our work, wasn't for nothing." Tomas nodded, squeezing Jorik's hand. "It wasn't. And speaking of work, what will you do now? I mean, your previous employment isn't exactly an option anymore." Jorik's expression turned contemplative. "I've been thinking about that. There's going to be a need for people who can navigate the new system, ensure it doesn't get corrupted again. Maybe I can help with that. Use my skills for good this time." "I can't think of anyone better suited for it," Tomas replied earnestly. "And you won't have to do it alone. I plan on staying involved. Make sure history doesn't repeat itself." They discussed potential plans for the future, from advocating for transparency in government to setting up a consultancy that would work with various planetary systems to secure their data and political processes. As the day turned into evening, they decided to take a walk along the nearby city park, enjoying the peace that had eluded them for so long. The path was lined with luminous plants that glowed softly in the dusk, casting an ethereal light on their path. "Do you ever think about how strange it is that we ended up here?" Tomas asked as they walked. "All the time," Jorik replied. "But I've learned that the strangest paths often lead to the best destinations." Tomas stopped, pulling Jorik close. "I'm glad your path led you to me," he said, leaning in for a kiss that was both a seal of their past struggles and a promise for the future. As they broke apart, Jorik wrapped an arm around Tomas. "Me too. And wherever this new path takes us, I know we'll face it together." The final scene showed them walking hand in hand, the cityscape sprawling before them, bustling with the vibrancy of a society on the cusp of something truly new. They had faced incredible odds, but together, they had emerged not just victorious but transformative. As they disappeared into the city's new horizon, the narrative closed on their shared laughter, a sound full of hope and mutual trust, echoing the sentiment that indeed, when a human target terrified the galaxy's deadliest assassin, it was not with fear, but with the depth of his love and the strength of his ideals.